The following is a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.
Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. It's your midweek fix for racing news and information. Brought to you by the Championship Racing Network. Now let's head trackside to join your hosts, Steve West and Matt Nicholson.
Welcome to the very first ever edition of Crossed Flags. This is a podcast done by myself, and this is Matt Nicholson here. We're going to introduce ourselves to you guys. For those of you that don't really know us, now I work up here at Cumulus Media. I work for Talk 99.5 as the producer for the Dixon and Vining Morning Show. But I've had a long-term interest in racing going all the way back to that famous 1979 Daytona 500 where the East Coast, including Alabama, got socked in by a blizzard. And we all sat and we all watched the Daytona 500 that wrapped up with, yes, Richard Petty winning, but probably better known for the fight between Bobby and Donnie Allison on one side and Cale Yarborough on the other. And I've just been in love with racing ever since then and just kind of expanded it out when it comes to being in love with motorsports. Have had the chance to do several different kinds of shows, whether they're just a couple of minutes long all the way up to doing a 2-hour-long show that we entitle the Championship Racing Network, which you see right here. And that is our parent company, so to speak, for this Crossed Flags. This is Matt Nicholson. Matt Nicholson is the one that came up with Crossed Flags. Tell them how you came up with that first.
Well, the Crossed Flags, anytime in motorsports, the Crossed Flags signifies the halfway break of whatever race you may be racing in, whether it be NASCAR, IndyCar. Formula One, I didn't think does it, but I know NASCAR and IndyCar does as well. So signifying being the day that we're on right here doing this recording and talking about halfway points of the week, Cross Flags, I thought was appropriate.
It was, very much so. The other thing that we want to let you know is that Matt is our resident racing driver. He's not only gotten behind the wheel of a couple of race cars, you've actually been able to win. Yes, I am, and we're going to classify it as a multi-time winner across local dirt tracks across the state of Alabama and western Georgia and eastern Mississippi as well. I've amassed, I think the last count I had, I think was 27 total wins that I've had over a 10-year career. And then I haven't been in the seat very often. I drove for a gentleman last year in a modified sportsman car in Clanton, Alabama. That's the first time I've been behind the wheel in over 6 years. Yeah. But amassed multi-time winner, 2009 track champion at the now defunct Shelby County Speedway that was owned by the Ingram family. This was located in between Wilsonville and Columbiana here locally. But it was a pretty good ride. Yep. Pretty good ride. So he is our resident racing driver. So anytime I've got questions about certain things like building the car out or what the experience is behind the wheel, I turn it over to this gentleman. So that's our basic background. We do have a weekend show that expands out on this as well from 8 to 10 a.m., 2 hours, and you'll see a little billboard here at the end of our podcast that'll let you know right where you can go, and you can check that out as well. Now, what are we going to talk about, you might ask? Well, over about 30 minutes or so, give or take, every week, we're going to take a deep dive into a couple of different subjects. In this case, we're going to deal with NASCAR first, and then we're going to turn our attention over to Formula One. Because later on when we get into Formula One, there's a couple of investigations that are going on that we wanted to talk about. But first, we want to talk about penalties when it comes to NASCAR. And this does go back to Atlanta Motor Speedway. So as we are setting this up here, that's a week and a half ago. Sure. But there were two penalties that came out of that. First of all is a glove that Joey Logano, two-time Cup Series champion, decided to put on. Now, I don't know whose idea this is, but you can see this glove behind us here, and we'll get you a better shot of it here in just a couple of moments. But this glove here was webbed out, as they call it, the Spider-Man glove or the duck glove, if you want to call it that. And these cars are so aero right now. And you even had a very, very close look at these, the next gen, the Gen 7 car, or whatever you want to call it. Right. Matt had a pretty good look at them not that long ago going through the garage, and you and I have had the chance to go out on pit road and get a fairly close-up look at these cars. These cars are built like tanks. Very aero-dependent. I would think that the word tank is an understatement. Yeah, very aero-dependent, though. So what we have found, especially when these guys get into qualifying at a high-speed track, at Daytona, at Talladega, now Atlanta Motor Speedway, with the way that they've got the rules package set up, they're doing everything that they can to try and make sure that they are saving as much time as possible. And that includes, we've seen many of the drivers put their hand up against the window to try and block air from coming into the car. I'll say this is an ingenious idea.
Yeah.
But that old saying in the racing industry of you read the rule book for what isn't in there as opposed to what is in there.
Right.
They took this too far, and they got penalized $10,000 for this. No points, though.
Right. That is, this right here, I would say is more of trying to get a little bit too cute.
Sure.
And like we've discussed before, trying to get too cute and trying to not get caught.
Right.
Well, with the way everything is nowadays, with you got camera angles anywhere and everywhere, in a car, around a track, no matter where it may be, something like this right here, that's a little bit too big of a gamble. Here's why. Because each one of those gloves, and if I had have thought about it, I would have brought one of my gloves that I have that is the same identical SFI rating that these gloves are. All of them are standard rated gloves at 3.2A/5.
Okay.
That's the standard rating for gloves for fire safety. And what that equivalents out to roughly 30 to 45 seconds worth of burn time in the glove, on the glove itself.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't count if a fire was to hit your sleeve and run up your sleeve and get on your hand.
Sure.
We saw that instance happen a few years ago at Talladega with Jordan Anderson.
Yeah.
Okay. That's burn time on the outside. So that equivalent, in layman's terms, what that means is that glove can burn for 30 to 45 seconds before it hits your skin.
Which is big, because that's as fast as some of these safety crews work.
Right.
That gives them a good amount of time to get to you,
Sure.
get to the car, and put whatever fire out maybe
Exactly.
trying to get to you.
Now, the webbing in between here, in between all the fingers, what that does is that is alteration of the glove. And when you alter a piece of SFI rated material that comes straight from the factory, and for instance, right here, this one is made by Puma Motorsport. Your main companies, Simpson Race Products, Impact Race Gear, Puma Motorsport, OMP Motorsport, Alpine Stars International, the way they send them out of the factory is the way they are and the way they've been already tested. Okay? That webbing in between there, that alters and essentially voids the SFI rating.
Sure. Well, they had to sew that in.
Yeah, it had to be sewed in.
Guess what that creates? Holes.
So let's say hypothetically, while he's on his qualifying attempt at Atlanta, to which he was the outside pole sitter for that race, even though he had to go to the rear for this violation, say a freak incident happens. A piston comes out of the engine, cuts an oil line, car catches fire. Fire gets into the cockpit. Mm-hmm. What's the first thing that's in jeopardy? His hands.
Indeed.
That's the first thing in jeopardy. But there's one little key thing I see in this photo right here. You look at the very bottom of where that Puma emblem is. It says year of manufacture, 2017.
These things were already out of NASCAR's rule book eligibility for being used while he's behind the wheel anyway.
Bingo, because you have to do it. And you have to have new gloves and new safety equipment every year.
Yep.
That's
Now,
to the updated specifications.
They can, if they meet the same specifications, you could use maybe the previous years, but you're not going to be able to go back much further, correct?
I think it's within 2 years.
Within 2 years.
As farthest you can go back. That's 7.
They were doing this to try it out. They were doing a test.
And where
That's what they were doing.
And where they're trying to test with that webbing is anybody that has watched the in-car camera view of any car that is qualifying at either Daytona, Talladega, or in this instance, Atlanta Motor Speedway. You'll see them drive one-handed, and you're thinking, what are they doing trying to drive one-handed? And they're holding their hand up. What they're doing is they're trying to deflect any air possible from getting into the car as well as getting onto that left corner of that spoiler. Because any air that hits that spoiler creates drag. So if they can deflect air off of that spoiler and deflect air from getting in the car, less drag. Less drag means more speed.
Yep. Same thing as if you're going down the highway or trying to get on the interstate. You get on the interstate with your windows closed on your car, it's a little bit easier. If you got the windows rolled down, you'll notice you probably have to press the accelerator just a little bit harder to get up to the same speed at the same amount of time. Right. So that was that situation. And then Stewart-Haas Racing got hit with a pretty severe penalty related to roof rails. And roof rails are an area just literally going right over the top of the car, right above the window area. And NASCAR's rule book is pretty specific about what it needs to be. It has to be a specific width. It has to be flat. It has to be made out of a specific material. Now, they leave it up to the teams to build them. So in other words, this isn't a NASCAR supplied part, but they specify this is what it needs to be made out of. This is how big it needs to be. It needs to be flat in this case. It needs to be painted, all this kind of stuff. But they picked out these particular roof rails off of the 41 and the 10 car from Stewart-Haas Racing at Atlanta and said, we don't like these, to the point where they docked the 41 and the 10 car 35 owner points each and docked the drivers, Noah Gragson and Ryan Preece, 35 championship points. And going into Vegas this past weekend, that actually put Noah Gragson into a deficit in points. He started the Vegas race 6 points below zero.
-6, yep.
What are you seeing here that caused NASCAR to really have a fit and throw that book at him?
All right. What I can see here on this right here, this looks like basic material that you would use. Any local dirt late model driver, or even local asphalt racer would know. That looks like 18, 20, at the most 24 gauge aluminum. Mm-hmm. Basic material. It's not steel, because you would not be able to bend steel like that. These are fabricated parts. Mm-hmm. All right. If you look at the holes right here, look at the top 3 holes versus the bottom 3 holes. There's some elongation and differences within each one of those holes if you look very, very closely.
Which will tell you they used them before.
They've been used before.
Right.
So therefore, and you can see, like right there, there's some indentation in it. Whether you think it is or not, that's an aerodynamic advantage. But what I'm thinking, instead of more of it being an issue with how the holes are drilled out and how they're attached, I think it was a material issue, because the thinner material that you go, you got the ability for it to flex, therefore cutting your airflow down, therefore generating more speed however you can.
It is interesting. Stewart-Haas Racing is a 4-car team.
Sure.
It's interesting that they only dinged them on the 2 cars, the 41 and the 10, but the 4 and the 14 apparently didn't have this problem.
Sure.
We were hearing all throughout the course of this year that, or in the off season, I guess I should put it that way, that when it came to what we saw out of Stewart-Haas Racing last year, and it was a down year. For the first time since they were created in 2009, they did not get a win in the Cup Series. But we always heard that it was kind of Kevin Harvick over here on this side and then the 3 other cars over here on this side.
Sure.
Now all of a sudden it seems like we got the 41 and the 10 on one side and the 14 and the 4 on another. But I thought that they were talking about how they were all going to be one cohesive unit as a team and an organization this season.
It seems that way, even though it's still early in the year and we're only going into race 4. But it seems that the 14 has separated himself, and the 4, 10, and the 41 are right here in a group, with the 10 starting to edge himself a little bit further forward. Mm-hmm. Because he had a good, solid race last week in Las Vegas in his hometown. Noah Gragson did.
Yeah.
But I'm like you, and they said that at the start of the year, we all want to work together as one. But there's still that separation there.
Yeah. And you still got a situation where 2 cars have roof rails being confiscated, but the other 2 don't.
Right.
It's very interesting to kind of think about the dynamic of it. I mean, the penalties are bad enough. Stewart-Haas Racing probably not going to worry about trying to contest this or protest this particular penalty. They'll probably just let it stand and let it go. I think they would have already filed if they wanted to be heard on this and see if they couldn't get it overturned. Seeing as they haven't in a week and a half, I doubt seriously that they will. But this is a very interesting situation to me in the fact that they're going to go through this process of having used roof rails for 2 of the cars, but then either double check and make sure that they've got new ones for the 4 and the 14, which didn't get penalized, or they reused them and they were in much better shape, or they made sure that they were in better shape.
Probably that was the case. It would make no sense for 2 to use used ones and 2 to only use the other ones.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, the way that the sport has gotten with these brand new cars, the Gen 7 cars, the next gen, whatever you want to call them, with how stringent they are on specific parts and parts not being altered, why would you let them be what I would call house-fabbed parts, but yet your whole other car has got to be bought
Right.
in a kit and put together and assembled there? It doesn't add up to me. If you're going to have one part of the car, even down to a simple nut and bolt, if you've got to buy that specific nut and bolt, you should be able to have to get those too, because I know for a fact that 5 Star Bodies, the main fabrication company that makes the bodies for all the cars, they make pieces like this. Air deflectors.
Seems like it would be one of those situations where they would get it as a single source part.
Exactly.
Well, we'll find out how it goes and how good Stewart Haas Racing can recover from this particular situation with those guys. And while we're on that topic of Stewart Haas Racing really, really quick, what have you seen? I mean, we saw them at Atlanta. We saw Chase Briscoe able to run up front most of the day, made a mistake, which is easy to do by trying to cut down in front of somebody and making a little bit too aggressive move. We talked about Noah Gragson, his performance, what we saw at Las Vegas last weekend. It seems like even though really none of the Fords are doing all that great, I mean, of the 3 races that we've seen so far, all of them have been won by Chevrolet.
Ford has got an aerodynamic issue right now.
They do, number one, but there does seem to be speed in those 2 Stewart Haas Racing, or in the Stewart Haas Racing cars. Because at Atlanta, we saw Josh Berry making a move towards the end of the race before he got caught up in something not of his own doing. We've seen flashes from Ryan Preece as well. We've also seen where Joey Logano has been able to get his car up on the front row all 3 races so far this year. You know, we've seen flashes from the Ford camp, but we just haven't seen them be able to close the deal.
Yep. They've got, when the cars are in traffic, like I said, they've got an aerodynamic issue somewhere. Where it is, I don't know. But they've got an aero issue that they got to figure out, because Chevrolet's got their act together. Toyota's climbing. They're not there yet, but they're climbing.
Because they've got a new car too this year.
Yeah. But Ford has got an issue somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and Toyota apparently is like you said, they're kind of trying to figure it out right now as well. Again, they don't have a win either, although we've seen really, really good performances from Denny Hamlin. If they hadn't had a weird situation, Bubba Wallace, I don't know what he might have been able to do at Las Vegas, but he had 2 top 10 he had 2 top 5 finishes at Daytona and Atlanta to kick off the year. And then they had basically one of the lug nuts weld itself on. How the heck does that happen?
Well, when it comes down to that, that's as simple as when you put the single lock nut on the wheel, that's an over torque. Because rule of thumb that I've always heard from crew members that I know personally, when they're doing these single lug nuts, you hear, when it gets all the way down, you hear pop, 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 3 licks, get off.
Yeah.
Sounds to me what this was an over torqued nut that got on there, and the heat caused it to weld itself to it.
Got it. They had to cut that thing off, and he finished several laps down. But he also showed a maturity that we might not have seen, say, 2 years ago in the fact that he was out there helping out his teammate Tyler Reddick towards the end, trying to give Tyler Reddick a chance at maybe catching up to Kyle Larson. Just didn't have the car.
Yeah, that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. And I think that the other part of it is the fact that Chevrolet is now, they haven't changed this car since the introduction of this Gen 7 car. So they've got a good book on this car, whether you're Hendrick Motorsports or whether you're Trackhouse Racing or Richard Childress Racing. If you're running a Chevrolet right now, you've got a good textbook on what this car can and can't do well, and you know how to work your way around it. With the new cars over at Ford and all those Ford teams and all 3 Toyota teams, it's weird to say 3 now, but it's true. They don't have that book right now. because the body has changed significantly enough where they have to still work up a new book on these cars.
It has.
So we'll find out over the course of time whether or not and who it is that is actually able to write that book faster.
Sure. For sure.
Got a guess?
At the pace that they've shown this year so far, I'm going to say 2311 gets their book written first.
Okay. And that would make sense because what Toyota has done with Joe Gibbs Racing first and then expanding it out to 2311, and now you have Legacy MC, Legacy Motor Club.
Sure.
They have really made sure that all of the teams are well vested in knowing what's going on so that they can all work together and make their cars better and perform better at the same time. Ford has started to take the page out of that. We see a lot of this Ford performance talk, but you still have kind of Team Penske over here, and they've got Front Row Motorsports with them, and you got Stewart-Haas Racing over here. We don't really seem to be as cohesive a unit under the Ford banner as the three Toyota teams are.
If you had to respectively rank Ford right now, I would say Penske and Front Row is 1A, 1B.
Mm-hmm. And they're affiliated. That would make sense.
All right. I would say Roush Fenway, Keselowski, RFK, and Stewart-Haas are 2A, 2B.
Okay.
There's really no specific one ahead of the other on 2A, 2B right now. Penske and Front Row clear 1A, 1B for the simple fact of look how many laps that Front Row's led this year so far.
Sure.
Versus how many laps Penske's led. And their overall performance from start to finish, save face from Joey Logano's problems that he has had the first two races. He had a decent finish at Las Vegas, but the first two races, which were kind of an anomaly because they're super speedway races, and that's basically flip a quarter and hope it lands on your side that you call, basically. So Penske Front Row's 1A, 1B. RFK and Stewart-Haas is 2A, 2B. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of have to tie in the Rick Ware team with RFK as RFK / Rick Ware, because the 51 car has been, in my personal opinion, drastically better this year.
How much of that is bringing in Justin Haley and him having been in a much more successful, much more organized team last year when he was running with Cowlick?
I'm going to say it's probably 60-40, 60 being bringing Justin Haley in, 40% tying in their new alliance with RFK.
Because now they're starting to see how these organizations are run better than what Rick Ware had been doing up until now, which was, truth be told, disjointed and very just kind of all over the place, willy-nilly.
Yep.
Okay. Well, hey, you got to get those lessons somewhere down the line. And on our regular show on Saturdays, if you take the time to listen to it, not only do we cover all top three series of NASCAR, Cup Series, Xfinity trucks, we also cover IndyCar. We cover the National Hot Rod Association, the NHRA. Whenever they have news, which right now SRX looks to be kind of dormant, but IROC, Ray Evernham, Jeff Gordon's old crew chief from the 1990s, they're trying to revive the IROC series. We're kind of covering that as well. We cover, and we did it really as kind of a novelty at the beginning, the all-electric series Formula E, and now all of a sudden a decade later, they're big time. Who knew? But we also cover Formula One. And Formula One is growing bigger and bigger here in the United States of America. And it's not hurt by the fact that we brought in a really, really fantastic facility, which Matt and I are hoping to get to very, very soon, down just outside of Austin, Texas, called Circuit of the Americas. And since then, we've seen Netflix's show Drive to Survive, Formula One Drive to Survive. If you haven't checked it out, it's actually a very good primer on how to kind of understand what's going on in Formula One and get kind of the differences amongst the 10 teams that are operating right now in F1. And then you get the city of Miami hosting a race that is centered on a course made out of a parking lot around Hard Rock Stadium, the home of the Miami Dolphins National Football League team. And then last year we had the very first Las Vegas Grand Prix, which includes them running a portion of the famed Las Vegas Strip. So now we got 3 races here in the United States of America. All the races are being run on ABC, ESPN, or ESPN2, and we're seeing the viewership jump up in that. Plus, like I said, Netflix's F1 Drive to Survive. There's a whole lot of a spotlight being put on Formula One now that hadn't been going on in a long time. And part of it's due to this guy right here. This guy that we've got in the pictures behind us is the president of the FIA. Now, the FIA is like NASCAR. NASCAR is the governing body over the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series and the Craftsman Truck Series and several other lower series like the ARCA Menard Series. FIA is the governing body over Formula One, Formula E, and even have a say a little bit over IndyCar. This guy is Mohammed bin Sulayem. He was elected the president of the FIA not that long ago. He's been able to oversee this with the help of Formula One's commercial rights holders. Now, what does that mean? Commercial rights holders for Formula One just means they have the ability to go out and make sure that we have deals set up with all of these tracks with the race promoters so that we can put these races on, 24 of them scheduled for this year. Plus, they have the control over the broadcasting situation. Here in the United States, I mentioned ABC, ESPN, and ESPN2, but they're getting their coverage from Sky Sports out of Britain. And that's the deal that Liberty Media is working on right now. Those two things are actually not related. Liberty Media is a totally separate entity from the FIA. The FIA has no control over Liberty Media at all. So that's why when we say that this guy has been able to oversee a lot of success, unfortunately, he may be overstepping his boundaries because we just found out this week this guy is under investigation for interfering with the operations of Formula One. And there is a definitive delineation. Ooh, there's some $10 words for you. That when we get down to it, there's an investigation going on, started this week by the, if you want to put it in law enforcement terms, the Internal Affairs Department of the FIA, which this guy don't have any say over. Okay? And they're taking a whistleblower's account that says he put a little bit too much pressure on the race stewards and the director over the Middle East operations of the FIA to close an investigation. Because what they did is they penalized one of the drivers, Fernando Alonso, driving for Aston Martin, last year's Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. They said that he didn't properly serve out a 5-second penalty because he was supposed to sit in his pit stall for 5 seconds before any work could be done. And they say that before the 5 seconds was up, the rear jack man started to jack the vehicle up. Well, apparently they didn't tell Fernando Alonso. So that's problem number one, because he could have then come back and corrected that situation. Sure. They waited until after the race was over. And they said, well, we're going to dock you 10 seconds because you didn't serve out the 5-second penalty properly. Well, Aston Martin immediately protested that particular ruling, which I understand that because apparently it was clockwise. It was really, really close. Plus what I just talked about, the fact that they didn't warn him or the team that they feel like that they didn't serve it out properly and give him a chance to make it right. So after the protest, they go back through and they start going back and forth and looking at video and arguing their specific points. Well, apparently Mohammed bin Sulayem, again, president of the FIA, calls the Middle East director for Formula One's operations, who then pressures the race stewards to rescind the penalty. That's the allegation. This is the equivalent of anybody in the France family, Lisa France Kennedy, Jim France, who are both really leading NASCAR into its current day, to come down to Talladega and tell people at Talladega, you can or you can't do this. That's why you have race stewards.
Yeah. This one's kind of touchy for me right here because, first off, regardless, no matter what the situation is, you should not have the president or chairman, whatever title you have. Let's just say you within the top 3 rungs of the ladder of whatever respective sport you oversee. no matter if it's motorsports, football, baseball, hockey, soccer, no matter what. They should not be even thinking about even asking race control, race stewards, race officials, whatever term you want to use. Mm-hmm. You should not even be thinking to even say, hey, take that away. It's not your place to officiate the race. It's your place to oversee the day-to-day operations of whatever said series or league that you're over. Stay out of it. It's that simple. Yeah. Stay out of it because you have an appointed race official, race director, race stewards, chief starter, whatever category you may be classified under. You've got that title for a reason, and that's your respective part to oversee. But like I said, at the end of the day, if you're a president, CEO, chairman, whatever of a respective division, stay out of the race operations.
Yeah, that's not your job. That's why you have hired these people to be put into that situation in the first place.
Right.
The mark of a good manager, and you can attest to this. Our producer, Molly, who is not pictured, she can attest to this. When it comes to being in a situation, you, as the boss, your main intent should be to go out and hire people who know what to do. You put them in that specific job where they know what to do, and you let them do their job.
Bingo.
If you have to interfere, that may not be the right person, or you might be a little bit overly controlling, and you need to figure out which one it is at that point in time. And you got to have an honest assessment of yourself at that point too. I'm not going to look at Matt and tell him, as the resident show racing driver, well, I know better than you what it's like to be behind the wheel, because I've only been behind the wheel in a couple of little driving experiences at Talladega and Atlanta. He's got a heck of a lot more mileage behind the wheel. What's going on behind us right here and all the production work on this, if I tried to tell Molly what the heck she's supposed to be doing, she should laugh me right out of the room because I haven't got a clue what the heck she's doing. Okay? I know what I'm doing in this seat. Period. Stay in your lane. He needs to stay in his lane.
Bingo.
Plain and simple.
Bingo.
But this comes up on top of the next guy that we're going to show you a picture of, and his name is Christian Horner. Christian Horner is the team boss for Red Bull Racing. And Red Bull Racing is right now the top of the heap when it comes to Formula One. He's been in charge of Red Bull's racing operations since they came in almost 20 years ago now. Red Bull bought out an old team that was not doing very well, and they created Red Bull Racing in 2005. Christian Horner was named the team principal right off the bat, and he's been there ever since. The thing about being in control for that long is that it can go to your head, and you can think, maybe I can get away with some stuff that maybe you shouldn't. And some allegations came down just before the season began that he might have been a little too forceful and inappropriate in some emails and text messages that he was sending back and forth with one or two employees at Red Bull Racing. Mm-hmm. And they complained. And this made it all the way up to the FIA offices. Well, Red Bull has decided, because they are a subsidiary company of what you know as the Red Bull Energy Drink Company. They are owned outright by Red Bull. I forget what the wording is when it comes to Europe. But basically, it would be Red Bull Incorporated or Red Bull LLC. That main parent company has all the subsidiaries, the energy drink company, the race team in Formula One, race team in here, this, that, and the other thing, right? Christian Horner was investigated by the parent company of Red Bull and was cleared of any wrongdoing whatsoever. But now all of a sudden we're starting to hear more and more chirping out of the FIA and out of people that are affiliated with either broadcasting Formula One or have been involved in a team in some way, shape, or form that say, you know what, Christian Horner probably really ought to go. I hate to tell you this, boys and girls, but if you were cleared internally, mm-hmm. you don't really get to call Red Bull and tell them, hey, this is what you need to do with your personnel.
Yeah, I mean, if you handle your situations in-house, You look through everything thoroughly. You clear the man. Let it go.
Yeah.
Nobody from like you said, FIA, Sky Sports, Formula One should be making the call of maybe he's been here 19 going on 20 years. Maybe it is time for him to go. No, you don't get that luxury. Mm. That's the uppers of the Red Bull parent company and Red Bull Racing based in Milton Keynes, Europe. Europe, same thing.
Close enough.
Yeah. So that's not your call. Stay out of it.
Yeah.
If there was anything any deeper to it, he wouldn't have been in Bahrain this weekend.
No, absolutely not. And the other side of it is that if Christian Horner is in a situation where he continues to do this, this will rear its ugly head once again. Because for a while, sure, you might actually kind of start minding your P's and Q's, but you start to go back into old habits again and again. It's just the way that things go. So if he indeed was being abusive or indiscriminate or whatever you want to call it in text and or emails, it's going to happen again. And then Red Bull needs to take the appropriate action at that point in time. But as they say in American sports, and it doesn't matter whether it's the NFL, college football, Major League Baseball, the NBA, NHL, pick a sport, doesn't matter. Winning cures a lot. And Red Bull right now has won 3 straight drivers' titles, 2 straight Constructors' Cups, and that's in addition to the 4 straight drivers' titles and 4 straight Constructors' Cups that they won from, I think it was 2009 to 2013 or 2008 to 2012.
Yes.
One of those 2.
Yes.
This guy has been extremely successful in his role as the team boss at Red Bull because even when they weren't winning drivers' titles and or Constructors' Cups, they were always top 3 in points at the end of the year every single year.
No worse, yeah.
That kind of success breeds continued success, and that's what this guy has overseen. Again, Red Bull, happy with him being in the position that he's in. The FIA, Formula One, all these people that are sitting there saying, hey, he's got to go because sooner or later there'll be a personality conflict. You don't know that. You've got to wait and find out and see if it actually does happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you'd like to see and or hear more of this, we're going to be doing this every single week, Wednesday afternoons and Wednesday evenings. So we appreciate you checking us out. And, of course, I said this before. I'll say it again. We got a Saturday show as well, which you'll be able to find out in our closing card. But it airs Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central Time. And you can go to our main YouTube page, which is go onto YouTube and just look up CRN Live. Again, you'll see it on our ending card here, and hopefully you'll join us then. And join us again next week right here as we hit the middle of the week with crossed flags once again. And I get the funny feeling we're going to be talking about this whole Andretti Global trying to get into Formula One situation here pretty soon. Is it next week? Not certain, but that's coming. That's going to be a major topic. Heck, we might spend 30 minutes on that alone.
For sure.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Hope you join us again and check this out. There are several different ways you can check this out, by the way. You can check it out on the YouTube page for Jocks 94.5. And also, you can take us with you in your car. No, you won't have the video side of it, but you'll have the audio side of it by going on to jocksfm.com, looking up podcasts, and you can find this particular podcast as well. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you next week right here on Crossed Flags.
You've been listening to Crossed Flags, a racing podcast. For more content like this, subscribe to CRN Live on YouTube, and you'll be set to catch the 2-hour live show every Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central.
This has been a presentation of the Championship Racing Network.